Hello, everyone. Welcome to Fired Up, the podcast for marketers working in early and late stage startups. I'm Morgan McClintock, the CEO of startup marketing agency Firebrand. We've launched this podcast to interview the best in the business, but I'm not going to do it alone. So please meet my co-hosts.
I'm Nicole Pytel, Firebrand's VP of Content Marketing.
And I'm Chris Ulbrich, Firebrand's Head of Media Relations.
I'm Ian Lipner, a tech PR and crisis communications veteran.
We'll drop a new episode each week, so there's plenty of fuel for your marketing fire. Get the spark you need to take your startup to a whole new level. Hello, and welcome to Fired Up, the startup marketing podcast. My name is Morgan McClintock, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Nicole Pytel.
Hey, Morgan. Hey, everybody. I am so excited for today's episode. We are going to talk to one of the smartest and nicest people I know, an amazing product marketer who I have learned so incredibly much from. So, Morgan, why don't you introduce Kristine Newman to everybody?
Yes, we're talking about product marketing today with Kristine Newman, who is a VP of product marketing at Shoreline. Since the days of programming Y2K fixes in New York, Kristine's career has bridged both the product and marketing sides of the business. After 8 years spent at Accenture and another 8 years as a product leader in the mobile space during the early days of mobile apps, she's settled into her role as a marketer. Now, Kristine has had leadership positions at BWC Global, Petco Corporate, and later consulted with dozens of B2B tech companies as a fractional product marketer. Earlier this year, she joined Shoreline.io as the VP of Product Marketing, leading a small and mighty marketing team for this Series B cloud service provider in the Bay Area. Now, this company is working to unlock machine learning and AI capabilities for on-call engineers, inspiring Kristine to look for creative ways to achieve maximum impact in marketing. So, Kristine, welcome to Fired Up.
Thank you, Morgan. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
It's great to have you here. And so we're excited to dive into the topic. And we normally start with something topical, but I'm going to tell you, it's actually quite hard to find trends that are going on in product marketing. But here's a stat, according to a career site, Zippia. As of 2023, there are over 46,521 product marketing managers in the US, but there are 166,047 job openings for product marketing managers. So this is a really hot space that's really in demand. And I just wondered whether you could talk to us a little bit about that.
You know, I came into product marketing kind of backwards, forwards, however you call it, right? My degree was in marketing, but I left college working in a very technical position for Accenture. I was coding in COBOL and, as you said, doing Y2K fixes, right? So I was very technical early on, being a consultant, doing these large-scale ERP implementations in telecommunications space, right? I was not leveraging my marketing background at all. And I only came back to that about 10, 15 years into my career, came back into marketing, right? So the technical baseline was actually really important coming into being a product marketer. And that might be why it's really tough to find product marketers, right? It's difficult to train somebody in marketing and then also train them in the technology and background that is necessary in order to find that nice balance in between a technical product and then the marketing applications and go-to-market of that product. I think that's what we might be seeing. For me, it was a relatively new discipline. And I say that, you know, having a career that spans multiple decades. So it appears relatively new to me. It wasn't something that was available to me in my education. So it might be that too. But it also appears to be an opportunity. If there's not a lot you're seeing about product marketing in the news, that feels like there's just not a lot of folks talking about it yet.
I was really surprised that there is a product marketing institute, I think, and I was just surprised at the lack of specific news and trends in here. But maybe for our audience, we could sort of zoom out a little bit and tell us, when we're talking about product marketing, what do we mean? What does a product marketer do? They're obviously in hot demand.
Yeah. Well, they really sit at the middle of marketing, product, sales, and customer. and truly act as that sort of translation layer in between, right? So product marketer really has to be able to work with everyone and be able to speak the language of the technology team, be able to speak the language of the marketing team, speak the language of the customers, understand the positioning of the product and the audience and the competitors so that we can really work that space in the middle and ensure that the product has the appropriate light shined on it so that it illuminates, right? We want to make sure that the product stands out the best it possibly can and create that sort of magnetic energy from the right audiences.
Right. So how is this different than a product manager, or how does this role work with a product manager? It's a technical role, more technical than most people in the marketing department. But how does it liaise with product management, and what are the differences between those two?
Yeah, there should be a lot of close collaboration with product management. Product management typically will oversee full design, development, testing of a product all the way through to rollout, and then launch planning would be done in collaboration with a product marketer. So there is absolutely a handoff once you start thinking through the steps of go-to-market. How a product launch would be planned would fall on the product marketer and then the marketing team, right? What content needs to be produced, how it needs to be produced, how the sales team is going to leverage content to increase conversion, to increase, the audience that they're going after, to identify the right audience, to understand competitive positioning, to size the total addressable market.
You have to have this technical background. Does everyone who's in product marketing have a technical background? But maybe not. You're not actually building the product. You're not choosing the features. You're thinking about how to do the positioning and the go-to-market.
Yep. They have to have a certain amount of technical background, because in creating a battle card, for example, you have to be able to do a feature-to-feature comparison with competitors, and you have to be able to understand a product deeply enough to create the right comparisons there. If you're putting together a sales deck, for example, right, you need to be able to talk about the product in detail. And engineers have a very specific way of talking about a product. Mm-hmm. Product managers have a very specific way about talking about a product. A marketer has to be able to fit in the middle and understand who the audience is, what they want to hear, what they're capable of hearing at different stages of the sales cycle, what will resonate the most. There's very much that, marketer is very much a conversationalist, right? Has to have that two-way communication. And so a product marketer really pulls that in and then uses the product team as the advocates for their product, as they should be, right? They should think it's the best thing since sliced bread, right? But the product marketer should have a very realistic view of how the product will be received by the market and understand what that positioning can be to ensure that there are the right type of sales and the right type of revenue and long lifetime value coming off of that product.
So there's a few schools of thought when it comes to, the very first marketer that a startup should hire. So some say it should absolutely be a product marketer. Some say it should be a growth marketer. Some say it should just be a good old-fashioned generalist. So tell us why it's so important to have a product marketer there on day one.
And Nicole, I love how you're begging the question a little bit and like, why is it important for the product marketer to be there first? Which I agree with. To me, the product marketer is doing the full assessment of the marketplace before the launch of a product, before doing the testing and learning applications that a marketer generalist would do. And to me, the product marketer is very much sort of the embodiment of measuring twice and cutting once. So doing that full assessment, looking at the competitors, looking at the other products in market, looking at what the audience needs, looking at those pain points, understanding how that product can solve that pain, and ensuring that that message resonates early on and well before a full go-to-market plan is in place.
So it sounds like, in PR, we often have to frame this new product in the context of the market. And, look, it's new and it's exciting for the company. It's their best product. But, it's in a competitive landscape. And I imagine for the product marketing team, it's the same. You are a champion for this product. You obviously believe in it, but you have to be realistic about its strengths and weaknesses. And sometimes I find that's a hard line to walk, because you don't want to be critiquing the product, but you have to be realistic about, look, this is what we're good at. we're going to market on that side. There are areas we need to improve. So is that often a little bit of a challenge in this role where you're framing it competitively?
Absolutely. And it's because you've got a leadership or even a board, right, that has a very distinct vision of what the product was built for. And you have a product team that, for the best purposes, right, should believe in their product and believe that it solves all of the pain points for all of the people. The product marketer should be more of a realist in terms of how it will be received, who it will be for. And if we go head to head with certain competitors, we will certainly lose for certain groups of people in certain use cases, right? And so there is a level of the reality that has to kind of come to play. And that isn't always a very popular opinion, but ultimately it's the product marketer's job to make sure that whichever way you're going to market for whichever audience, for whichever pain point, for whichever use case, right, is successful and that you're setting expectations correctly in that way. And that you're always testing and learning, right? Because the market is not stable whatsoever, as we've seen from pandemics and interest rates and things like that, right? Things are changing on a daily basis. Any minor event can have a massive impact on how audiences need, use, and buy.
So what are some of the mistakes that startups make when it comes to market fit? Is one of them, not doing that ongoing research of what's working and what's not? Or where do they tend to go wrong?
I mean, here's the thing about startups, right, is they're always changing, ever evolving, and I wouldn't even consider them making mistakes, right? They're making adjustments on the fly, right? Products are changing every day. They're, trying to capture a growth trend that is tough to jump onto, right? So there's a lot of failure points there too. So I want to hesitate when we say mistake, right? A startup is all about trying to, they have to make mistakes in order to grow. So that has to be embraced. And that constant change and transformation has to be embraced by the marketing team as well. And certainly the product marketer. One of the things I see happen is that startups tend to get very narrow-minded about why they built that product, right? How they sold what they were building into the investors, and then using that as the assumption going forward and getting a bit stuck, right? And they get stuck in, well, our first two customers that bought told us it was fantastic and this is how they use it. And so now when we go out into market and our TAM is 10,000 different customers, we're making assumptions based on those two customers. Or I myself was a customer of a product like this, and now I'm going to extrapolate all of my pain and my needs and what resonates for me to my entire audience. And I see that particular theory happen over and over and over again with all types of different startups. And I see the assumption last longer than it should in a startup. In a startup, everybody should be challenging assumptions over and over and over again. And that's the one that sticks around the longest, surprisingly. You can point to a focus group. Oh, well, the focus group was too small. You can point to data that you're pulling, more quantitative data, right? And, oh, well, those aren't the right people because they were self-selecting into your study. So they're not really the ones we want, right? There's a lot of different ways to try to identify these folks in the market and change the opinions, but these seem to be the ones that hold the longest, the strongest held assumptions by startups.
Right. So you might feel like, hey, we're chasing product market fit. We've got it. That's done. We've got the fit. We're off. But then the market changes, or you've got it for the first 10 customers but that's a niche, and that's not the big market. Those were just the 10 that you are. But actually the bigger TAM, they have a completely different needs for a different set of features, different way of using the product, that you've actually then got to sort of change the positioning and, in fact, maybe even change some of the features in order to access that market. Do I have that right?
Yeah. And a lot of times, and it's truly the pain points where I see this happening, right? Is the assumption around what that pain is and how acute it's felt by somebody, right? And I think either different companies create different types of pain points, or a broader audience feels the pain in a very different way, right? You can go into a group of people who feel pain because their leadership makes it a strategic priority. And you go to a broader group and they don't have that same strategic priority. So the pain is just less.
So one thing that I've seen with startups, maybe it's just because of their sheer size, and they tend to be smaller, is that everybody kind of has an idea of what the unique value propositions and the differentiators are for a specific product, but they don't sit down and really put pen to paper. So a lot of times they're describing it in different ways, or they're talking about different pains. So why is it so critical to have that corporate and product messaging alignment, even on really, really small teams?
Well, and the first point there is it's critical, but like we've talked about, right? Startups are changing, they're ever evolving. Even the sales folks, customer service folks are changing the messaging on the fly to see what works better, right? Because everybody's changing that next phase of growth. So doing a quick reset every time the company gets together for a meeting, I mean, hopefully not annually, but hopefully even more often than that, is really essential, right? Because you want that customer experience to be consistent all the way through. If you've got the marketing team telling them one message, right? It'll solve this pain. You get the sales team addressing an entirely different set of pain points, maybe a broader group of pain points, knowing that if they do that, right, they can close the sale, but maybe our product doesn't solve those pain points as well as another product. And then you've got your customer success team kind of coming through and saying, oh gosh, sorry, actually our product doesn't really solve those pain points. So you would have seen it in the second or third month you had our product, but our product isn't really there, right? Like horrible customer experience. Everybody's got to understand the product at a really deep level and make sure that they are hitting the value proposition, the pain points, kind of how we think about our hierarchy of messaging structure, and making sure that they're referencing that structure over and over again so that all of the communications truly match. The other reason that we'd want to document it, right, is to measure its effectiveness. Because if we get all the way through and customers are telling us, wow, like you guys sold this into us, it's completely different, it's actually incredible and amazing, and you're missing all of these things. That information then needs to go back into the messaging, and the messaging needs to be adapted to ensure that we're capturing why the product is so amazing. And then that needs to flow back through the cycle again, right? So it's documentation and communication so that the entire organization understands what resonates best. And then, potentially what variations, right? Different audiences will have a different variation of the messaging. Different products or product bundles will have different variation of that messaging. And it allows for also, onboarding of new employees.
So how do you kind of make the right balance between having that cross-company alignment and then having just too many cooks in the kitchen when it's time to do some kind of messaging workshop? Because everybody's going to come in with their idea. So where do you strike that balance?
That's like magic, I think. This one's actually really hard. There is not a very good scientific way to do these type of workshops, right? Because you want everybody's opinion. You want to make sure you've got influence in the room. You want to make sure that any objectors, right, are involved in the process, so you don't get that happening on the back end, right? And I've run a ton of these types of positioning and messaging workshops, dozens of B2B tech companies, and done it a variety of different ways, right? One strategy is to do a survey of all the companies, either executives, leaders, or survey the entire company at large and ask for input up front so everybody feels like they're being brought into the process up front and that their ideas are incorporated. Another way is to start with a super small targeted group. It can go very fast, but you have to make sure you have all the buy-in and that at the end of the process, you're not going to get an objector that's going to shut the whole thing down, right? Because changing the messaging around a product, even a brand, is very jarring for a company. There's going to be detractors, and that has to, they can take a project that's 6 months long. I've seen these projects go 18 months long, but they can take a project that's 6 months long and essentially crush it in the end. And you go back to either the old messaging or you go back to this fractured messaging framework. And neither one of those things is ideal. Ideally, you have a centralized framework that everybody feels really confident and good about. So building that confidence is part of the process, right? Testing it, making sure that everybody agrees that it is the right messaging, that it's the right framework, that being 80% there is better than being 90% there with one message and 50% there with another message, and right? And having that fractured message. So there's a lot that goes into a process like that. And I think there's a nice healthy balance, but you've got to have the decision makers. You've got to have the input of a large group of folks in the company. And you've got to keep in mind the folks that are going to be the objectors at the end of the process.
Right. We've certainly seen that as we come in and help with more on the corporate side, the messaging, trying to get, if you ask every member on the management team, how would they describe the company at that top level and what the vision is, there's often you uncover misalignments in there. So I can totally imagine at the product level, you see that all the time, and it can just, get stalled out because these are important people. And sometimes the objector is quite critical, right? They're challenging the concept a little bit. So you've got to listen to them. And sometimes, you've got to push ahead. I also feel once you've got the messaging right, you've got to give it some time to sort of soak in, and you've got to then sort of take the sales team. They've got to say it to people, or if it's the CEO talking about the corporate messaging, they've got to, is this something that I would say and I believe in? You've got to walk around in the new messaging a little bit to kind of go, okay, does this fit? Does it feel like, we've got to grow into it maybe, but does it feel like us? And then sort of have that feedback loop to kind of refine it.
I've been surprised because I would have thought product messaging, especially even for a new product, should be much easier than corporate messaging. Nope, I've not found that at all. And I keep thinking every time I've ever started one of these projects, right? I keep thinking, oh, well, at some point, all of the people are going to say, oops, my mistake. This messaging is the correct messaging. Nobody ever has done that, ever, not once. Of course, professionals are doing what they think is right. And they're bringing to the table their biases, their experiences, right? You've got one person who's only talking to a certain side of the audience. And the reason that the message has been adapted in their minds is because their audience responds to that message the best. And that is a very valid point of view. And it makes having a cohesive, centralized message very challenging.
Right. But you've got to get this right because, as you just said, if the sales team is out there selling something that really the product doesn't deliver on, then the customer service team is picking up all of these problems like, hey, I was told it had this feature even, or I could solve this pain point, and it just doesn't. And so it sounds like the customer success team from a product marketer's perspective is a great way to sort of find out, have we got alignment here? Because that's really where some of the problems are going to kind of unearth. Or you might hear, to your point, you might hear about, hey, actually, people say they love this thing, and we're not even talking about that.
Yeah, the customer success team is a wealth of wonderful information, but a program like that, a voice of customer program, can also run the risk of over-indexing a customer's needs versus understanding, the needs of the entire market.
That's key.
So you've talked about, product marketing is kind of this bridge between a lot of different sides of the company. So let's focus on sales for a second. So what are some things that product marketers can do to help sales close deals faster?
Documentation. So a sales deck, centralized sales deck that can be modularized and used by every different sales folks. The creation of product-specific case studies, the creation of battle cards, the creation of a market map to understand where that company fits relative to competitors. Incorporating, FAQs, product feature lists, demos, product explainer videos, right? So all of that content can be used in various ways to either reduce friction, increase conversion, and help accelerate that sales cycle.
So it sounds like a product marketer is creating you have a lot of hats. You're creating a lot of content. I see them writing the technical blog posts. They're writing this, first call decks on the product side, the sales materials, as you just said. You just then mentioned even the voice of the customer, like doing the customer evangelism part of it too. So content creation is a very big part of this role.
Yeah. And the product marketer, typically I've seen the product marketer roll into the marketing team or roll up into the CMO. That's not always the case. I have seen in some cases them roll into the product side of the business, but mostly it rolls in the marketing side of the business. And it's because so much of the output that's being created, so much of the collaboration that's happening is with the full marketing team. So depending on, the stage of the customer, the stage of the company and the size, right? The structure of the team would look very different, but ultimately there's a ton of overlap with a product marketer and a content strategist or a content creator, right? A ton of overlap with the customer success team, a ton of overlap with any PR and communications, a ton of overlap with growth marketing. So it goes on and on and on. There's just constant collaboration there.
Tell us a bit about that growth marketing interface then, because, it's a newer, we talked about, hey, product marketers don't really have a huge voice maybe, but the growth marketing is a new area. Hey, we're going to try and launch these new features, see if we can accelerate adoption or get people to kind of, so we've got a freemium product. How do we get people to trigger to be the paid? How do those two roles interrelate?
There's a couple, there's many different ways. The product marketer can sit there and simply provide sort of the expertise and content around a product launch, feature launch, or assist simply by being the product expert on those cycles. The product marketer can request certain types of growth marketing cycles to accelerate a launch, prepare for a launch. It depends on depends on what their objectives are, what the ownership is there. I've used growth marketing in the past to do message testing in paid media, for example. I've had that feedback loop with the growth marketing team to ensure that we have the ability to do a product-led growth motion, right? And how that can influence the adoption of the product going forward. So the growth marketing team can be essential there. There's a lot of different ways that those two teams can come together to help grow revenue, decrease the cost of customer acquisition, increase the lifetime value overall. And that's really what all of this is about, right? Is trying to increase the effectiveness and increase the efficiency of all of the efforts and go to market.
Right. And so to that point, PLG really helped, really does put, product marketing in front and center here. How are these teams normally measured? Like, what does success look like?
Ultimately, at the end of the day, I measure success of my efforts on the cost of customer acquisition, right? So whether, what that is and whether or not it's decreasing or, what it is by product, and then the lifetime value of those customers. And that's kind of at the end of the day, right? As you get into different tactics, different programs, right? You have other types of metrics that we hold ourselves accountable for. If a product marketer is simply creating a sales deck, right? You would look at the adoption of that sales deck, the usage of that sales deck, whether or not a single sales deck is centralizing all of that sales efforts, or if people simply ignore the deck and walk away and go create their own version, right? So it can get as detailed and scrappy as that. It really depends on whether or not a total addressable market sizing, right, has been leveraged in communications with investors and customers. So again, adoption, usage, how the messaging and positioning has proliferated throughout the company and potentially throughout, right? Once you hear analysts repeating your messaging back to you, that's when you get your checkbox and say, yeah, definitely, right? Not only does my team understand it, the industry understands it, and analysts understand it, right? So there's lots of different ways you can go through and look at metrics.
Yeah, that's great.
You've talked a lot about, ongoing testing and learning, and startups especially need to do that and get things wrong. And that's how they learn things. But the truth of the matter is they just have a shorter runway in terms of funding, people, resources, all of those things. So how does that translate into the runway for startups' product? How do you know when it's time that we need to make a pivot? Do we need to add new features? Do we need to change the user experience? Is our messaging not working? What does that runway look like maybe compared to some of the bigger guys who maybe have more time and more money and more brand recognition to kind of cushion getting it wrong?
I see this as less of a product problem and more of a channel problem, insofar as a single individual in your audience, right, can be exposed to an ad unit, a press release, word of mouth, right, an analyst report, and they can glance at a product page on your website and then be launched into a sales conversation, right? And the message for that individual can be very different than an individual who is a friend of the founder, who immediately, directs the founder to the economic buyer on their team, right? The economic buyer on their team goes and does a full deep dive into the website, potentially does a couple of searches online to look at competitor positioning, and then has a conversation with the sales team, right? Like the message for those life cycles can be very different, all leading to the same product. So to me, a startup is not so much defined as what the product is, by what the message is during that customer journey. And I think that a startup might be in a unique position to be able to do that simply because they have fewer buyers, fewer people are coming to the table with less of an idea about what the product would be. So they're having to do research through the customer journey. They're not an established company. They don't have an established name. There's no assumptions being brought to the table as a larger company, right? So a startup has the ability to kind of change the messaging and create adaptations for each of the customers through the life cycle.
That's a really interesting point because, when you think iPhone or Apple, you think of something very specific of what that product's going to be, but a startup doesn't have that brand awareness or that name recognition. So they really do have a lot more latitude to do things differently and message things differently and test things out. It's a really good point.
Yeah.
Let's just talk a bit about, we can't have a conversation without talking about AI and how it has impacted the whole role of product marketing. And so I'm just interested in how you're using it. Are there specific tools that your team are using? Talk to us a bit about that.
Yes. So, my company is in the AI machine learning industry, right? We're using AI machine learning to embedded in our tools to help engineers who are on call do their jobs better, right? So there's very much this embracing of AI technology. And, for me and my role, it is an essential element of how I'm looking at the next year and 2 years and 3 years, right? Because if we look out and look at what our marketing landscape looks like, AI is changing every tool we use, right? So for the tools that we currently use in-house in our tech stack, different AI elements are being added every single day. It's making, our cycles for content creation a lot shorter. So, ChatGPT is sort of an obvious one. Grammarly has been doing this for a while, helping writers. I've just recently used GenVid to create an AI product explainer video for $40. Not too shabby. So these are, capabilities like that. It wouldn't have occurred to me in the past to go use a tool to do these things. I'm using all the time, right? Canva has changed the way we create ad units and will continue to accelerate the change in the way we do ad unit creative. AI is absolutely creating new insights for us in LinkedIn Sales Navigator, any intent-based solution. We use 6 Sense. And 6 Sense is, it's changing the way we think about our funnel and identify the audiences in our funnel. So I feel extremely bullish on how how AI is going to force us to adapt as marketers going forward. And I think it's going to completely change the way our teams are structured. I think it's going to completely change the way we use our tools. It's going to change the way we think about every aspect of our jobs. So I realize that sounds really overwhelming, but it's so cool. Every marketer should be thinking about how to leverage these tools to make their jobs faster, easier, more impactful, right? Marketing can be influenced in so many different ways. How wonderful that we live in a world where we can do that, where we can leverage those tools and we can become better, right? Somebody who, previously only created static ad units can create now, all type, any kind of ad unit and can deploy it to multiple channels at once and can, pivot to different audiences. And I'm sort of thrilled about the possibilities there. The real trick will be learning how to use every different tool, learning how to use all these different variations of AI and understanding which ones create the best impact, right?
Right. Because product marketers are creating so much content, whether that's video or whether it's written content or whatever format is, presentations, you mentioned ad units or what have you, it must be fairly because the very role touches customer success, it touches sales, it touches the broader marketing team, it touches the product team. You're almost sort of at the very nexus of all those different trends, which is pretty overwhelming because there are so many new tools that could be used. And this is a role that we said at the beginning is in hot demand. So being able to power up those people to be able to get more productivity is critical. But, you could easily get sort of drowned in trying to learn Runway, and now I'm going to try and learn this other tool.
Yeah. Well, and I think if you come at it from like content creation, it can be overwhelming. If you come at it from content consumption and who's consuming what and how, and you sort of think about it from the audience's perspective, I think it can actually be quite exciting and helpful, right? Because I shouldn't have to create 500 pages of FAQ documents to help our customers navigate products, right? I should be able to ingest everything that the engineers have created into an AI and create a helpful chat bot. And those tools are just starting to be developed, and, I'm looking forward to having that ability. Wouldn't it be fun if instead of creating a single product explainer video, right, anybody logging in would be able to just simply tell them what their product is, and my product explainer video would sit on top of what their product is, show them all of the integrations that are available, right? And be completely customized for them and their environment. So I think from that perspective, we're just going to accelerate into a place where the content that's being consumed is either personalized or more helpful, more targeted, right?
So, Kristine, you've worked with, some very giant companies and some very small startups. So what product marketing lessons can our startup friends learn from some of those bigger guys?
Part of what the bigger guys are doing well is that they are documenting, they are thoughtful about methodology, they're thoughtful about communicating in a way that startups tend to be sort of manic, right? They're frantic. They're going in every direction. And they're like, we're so close. There's only 40 of us. There's only 100 of us, right? Like, we're so close. We don't need standard check-ins. We don't need the formality. And what I've always loved about my background as consultant, the larger companies I've worked with, right? That formality is a forcing mechanism for coming together and taking a moment, setting intentions and moving forward. And just being near somebody or chatting with somebody about some entirely separate topic doesn't mean you're necessarily on the same page. And I've seen a lot of startups not take into account the benefits that it has to create the methodologies, processes, and formalities that larger companies really benefit from.
Yeah, that's certainly, as you're scaling fast, getting all those processes in place will be important. And as you look forward this year in product marketing, what trends are you expecting to see beyond the AI impact? Is there anything specific that you've got your eye on there?
SEO. So for me, I look at, Google has defined what SEO looks like for us ever since essentially 2006, right? It was, you need a 5,000 word blog post in order to have any type of chance of ranking for a certain keyword when somebody does search. Well, that changes radically when folks start using AI to search up answers to what they're looking for. So for me, that means I have to change the entire way I think about the content that we're putting out into the ecosystem and the way that we're creating our authority in any given topic. And how is AI going to change SEO for us? Right? How will they decide whether or not Shoreline has authority in cloud ops? Right? And I'm paying close attention to what this is all going to be for us, because I'm really excited to see how this all nets out.
Right. So search generative experience there, where you have Bard or something that's going to sort of pull from the LLM the answer with a sort of zero-click experience. Traditionally, you would write a content pillar, a content anchor about cloud ops, your area, and you would be the most authoritative on that. If I just type it in, maybe I get the answer, maybe I get the link, but maybe you don't get the click. And so you're just got that informational stuff that, I then go on, you don't even know who I am. How are you changing? Is there anything specific about this that you're changing in the way that you create the content, or are you just expecting? Because I always feel like almost no one knows how to influence what goes into the index at the moment. But is there anything specific that you're doing right now to kind of get ahead of that?
I think right now, the way we're evaluating it, we're watching it. I think we're preparing to change for it. Yeah. But yes, we don't know what it's going to look like or how we come across as the authority in any given area, nor do we know what a paid placement looks like. So again, we sort of we're in a wait and see a little bit. I am imagining that our content needs to be a bit more, take a different angle and tone in terms of what we would expect an AI to ingest. So that's the sort of the minor change at this point. And I think a keyword strategy really has to be more of a prompt strategy at this point. But those are small things compared to what I really expect to change and how fast this is going to change, right? Sea changes in my career, have happened slowly. This one's going to go fast.
That's right. It's definitely, it's a multi-billion-dollar business for Google, so they're not going to want to get rid of the paid element, but making sure that you're their product marketing person, that you're the author of the content. It's not just the company; it's a specific named person. You already talked about producing video, so video about it so that people can find it in other ways. The best practices of SEO are probably going to stand you in good stead for whatever iteration we see in the future. The people who are doing the sort of black hat, quick win stuff may lose, but we'll see, because the internet will be flooded with low-level generic content. So somehow Google's got to work that out.
Yeah. And I think that, the flooding of the low level content is certainly an area where it's probably not going to pay out in the long run. And efforts like that are just not going to be that effective, right? Everybody can do that at this point. So
a good thing to look for next year. And as a sort of product marketing lead, this is something to keep your eye on, because you definitely want people in your area, cloud ops in this instance, coming to your site, or at least unearthing you as an expert. So our next section is called Smart People, Dumb Questions. And I literally have a bag, I'm going to show it here, of questions on my desk, and I'm going to pull them out. And these are questions which are a bit more personal. Let's just dive through these a little bit. What's the strangest job that you've ever done?
I worked at Dairy Queen when I was a teenager. It was right by the beach. And we got to make ice cream, blizzards, those kinds of things for all the folks going down to the beach. One of my favorite parts of that was the man that came in with the dog every day and gave his dog a large sized, vanilla frosty cone. And so I would make ice cream for dogs.
Very nice. That sounds a lot of fun. What's one item on your bucket list?
Always travel, right? So for me, going to Australia, I haven't been to Australia or New Zealand yet. So that's 100% on my bucket list. First thing that comes top of mind right there.
Yes. I'd love to go to New Zealand. I think that would be just brilliant. What book has changed your life?
Somewhat controversial, but Atlas Shrugged was one of the ones by Ayn Rand that I read pretty consistently, multiple times in my 20s. And I think just the kind of pro-capitalist outlook, the objectivism that she touts in that is a really interesting perspective of the world, and quite different than my traditional education up until that point. And it was the book I discussed with my husband on our first date.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, good, strong connection to that. What was the first concert that you ever went to?
Beach Boys. I was quite young.
Beach Boys,
I was little.
Where did you see them? Yeah.
But I danced in the aisles.
Yeah,
I distinctly remember it.
Where did you see them?
It was probably in the Bay Area. I was living up in the Bay Area at the time,
Oh,
so
nice.
I wouldn't even know. There were long steps, and I remember just
Oh, wow,
jamming out to the
right.
Beach Boys as a child.
Super fun. Super fun. Yeah, that's definitely one to pick out. Our next section is called the Fired Up 5. It's our quick fire section. So take it away, Nicole.
Yeah, absolutely. So we know you kind of had, you majored in marketing, had a roundabout way into it though, but what would you be doing today if you weren't in marketing?
Well, it's the holidays. So this is what comes to my mind is I would be a baker. I would make cookies and bread and cake. And I don't know if I'd be competitive, but I would definitely be baking all day long.
Nice.
And there is an element of test and learn. In baking, there is an element of test and learn, which I like, right?
Yes,
optimizing for results and things like that. So there's some similarities, some crossover.
There you go. Data-driven optimizations, absolutely.
Exactly.
What is the best career advice that you have ever been given?
Best career advice I've ever been given. Invest in my 401k. And I realize it's not necessarily career advice, but ultimately what I want out of my career is a healthy, happy retirement. And I think all roads need to ultimately lead to that.
There you go. Perfect. What is the tool that you cannot do your job without?
LinkedIn. It almost pains me to say it. It's a little obvious, but we are, for a B2B startup, right? We see our best conversion rates. We see a majority of our successful communications. We see marketing, sales. Like we could not live without LinkedIn.
So we talked about AI. We've talked about SEO. What other hot trend have you got your eye on?
Is there a trend that doesn't involve AI? I was looking at, here's one actually. Here's an interesting one. Ensuring, executives, executive profiles and how to use executive-led sales. We've been experimenting with the ways that instead of a brand going out into the market, we're using the executives to go out into the market and speak on behalf of the brand and ensuring that particular process has been optimized. There are a lot of different ways to do this and even do it at scale, which I hadn't known before. But I think that trend has actually been quite interesting for us and successful for us as well.
Interesting. So what is your biggest goal for 2024, either personally or professionally?
My biggest goal for 2024 is to expand the way I think about go-to-market beyond product marketing, beyond marketing, expand all the way into sales and customer success in a super deep way so that I understand the full life cycle of our customers as they, from the point of awareness until the point of either renewal or, exit, right? And truly get very deep into the functions of those teams. My goal is actually pretty aggressive. Not that I think about it.
That is an aggressive goal, but helpful, ridiculously helpful and ridiculously aggressive all at the same time.
And it goes back to some of the processes and standardizations that I fundamentally believe in. So I think there's a lot that can be done for startups in the connecting and the hand-holding between all those teams.
Yeah. Can you write a book on that?
Right.
There you go.
I know.
Kristine Newman, the VP of Product Marketing at Shoreline. Thanks so much for coming on Fired Up. I really enjoyed talking to you. If people want to get in touch with you, where should they go?
LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn, Kristine M. Newman. And shoreline.io also has our website has information about me and where you can find me. But I really appreciate being here. Thanks so much, guys.
Yeah. We'll put those contact details in the show notes. Thanks for coming on. We loved having you.
Yeah.
Talk to you soon.
Awesome. Bye, guys.